The Fly by Katherine Mansfield. Fly means hope, fly means strength. In the crowded city, in the crowded earth. Today we will discuss the short story The Fly by Katherine Mansfield. First, introduction. Katherine Mansfield, 1888 to 1923, despite her short range and small production, is considered one of the founders of modern English short story. She achieved fame by writing solely in a form which was then undeveloped and neglected, and raised the short story to a new level of artistry. At present, her strong influence in this field has been recognized by most of the critics. His early life. She was born as Kathleen Mansfield Beauchamp on October 14, 1888, in Wellington, capital of New Zealand. Her father, Sir Harold Beauchamp, was a wealthy businessman there. She had her early education at a local school, and her childhood was spent happily in company with her brother Leslie. The certain atmosphere at home and the dull outward surrounding, however, did not add to her contentment. It was at her suggestion that the father decided to send his daughter to England to have a polish. In England, she was sent to Queen's College, London, to finish her education. Her age at this time, 1903, was 15. London became her spiritual home. She attended the college up to 1906. After spending 4 years in this educational institution, she came back to New Zealand. Death of the brother and second publication. The World War I, 1914 to 1918, was a period of great hardship for the Murrays. It put great strain on their lives. In addition to this, she lost her dearly loved brother Leslie in the war. This loss was so deeply felt that it drove her to recapture in her writing the New Zealand of the childhood she shared with him. Referring to his death, she wrote, "I want to write recollections of my own country to make our undiscovered country live into the eyes of the old world, not only because it is a scared duty I pay to my country because my brother and I were born there, but also because in my thought I range, wonder with him over all the remembered places." Her wish resulted in the publication of her second volume, Bliss and Other Stories, 1920, a collection of short stories, many of which are amongst the richest literature set in New Zealand. It unmistakably shows her maturity as an artist. Bliss subtly dramatizes a woman whose ecstatic mood marks her real fear. Its masterpiece, The Daughters of the Late Colonel, is a comically poignant story that depicts the life of two women terrorized by their father. By this time, she was increasingly recognized as an original and experimental writer, whose stories were the first in England to show the influence of Chekhov, whom she greatly admired. Her success, remarks the editor of the Oxford Companion to English Literature, aroused the jealousy of V. Woolf, who began to describe her work as hard and shallow. The story, The Fly, in brief. Old Woodfield came to visit his old employer. Old Woodfield came to visit his old employers, the boss, on a Tuesday, the day he was allowed to go out. After his stroke, his wife and daughters kept him almost confined to his house except on Tuesday. Woodfield's talk was over, yet he was staying on. He wanted to say something but could not remember. The boss liked him to admire his newly renovated office with green leather, armchair, bright carpet, and electric heating. To help him remember, the boss offered old Woodfield a glass of whisky, which he confidentially told was procured from the cellars at Windsor Castle. As the drink reached his chill brain, Woodfield was able to remember. He informed the boss of his daughter. She sent her to Belgium, where they had seen the grave of the boss's son lying close by the grave of their brother Reggie. The place was nicely kept and flowers were growing on all the graves. Woodfield was gone. The boss recrossed the carpet and sat down heavily on the spring chair. He informed his messenger, Messi, that he would see nobody for half an hour. The door was shut. It was a terrible shock for the boss when old Woodfield reported to him about his son's grave. It seemed the earth had opened. He had seen the boy lying there with Woodfield's daughters staring down at him. It was strange. For all these 6 years he never thought of the boy except as lying unchanged and spotless in his army uniform, sleeping forever. My son, the boss groaned, but unlike other occasions, no tears came out. Earlier, whenever he uttered those words, he was so much overwhelmed with sorrow that only a violent fit of weeping could relieve him. Time, he had told others, could make no difference. Old men might forget their loss, but not he. How was it possible that no tears came out now? His boy was an only son. Ever since his birth, the boss had worked at building this business for him. It had no other meaning. It was not for the boy. Life itself had come to have no other meaning. The boy grew up and started learning business rules and procedures. He had taken to the business line marvelously. Every employee down to Messi was full of praise for him, but all that was over as if it had never existed. The day when Messi had given the boss the telegram bearing the terrible news of his son's death in the war, the whole place came crashing about his head, and he had returned home a completely broken man. 6 years seems to be only a matter of yesterday. The boss took his hands from his face. He was puzzled. Sometimes something seemed to be wrong with him. He decided to get up and have a look at the boy's photograph, but it was not his favorite photograph. The boy appeared to be cold and stern looking. It was not his natural expression. At that moment, the boss noticed that a fly had fallen into his ink pot. He took up a pen, picked up the dirty fly, and put it on a piece of blotting paper. The fly soon began the immense task of cleaning itself. After wiping the ink out of its wings, it succeeded in cleaning its face. It had thus escaped danger and was ready for life again. Suddenly, an idea came into the boss's mind. He dipped his pen into the ink pot and shook a drop of ink on it. The fly again began the task of cleaning, though in a weaker way. The boss marveled at his attempts and courage, but no sooner had the fly cleaned itself than the boss jerked out another drop on it. What could it do now? The fly again started the painful process of cleaning. The boss even breathed on it to help the drying process. Then he decided that he would let fall another drop, and that would be for the last time. He did as he decided. The fly lay still. In spite of his encouragement, the fly did not move. It was dead. The boss flung it on the waste paper basket, but such a grinding feeling of misery overtook him that he felt positively frightened. Though he passed the handkerchief inside his collar, his perspiration did not stop. In spite of his best efforts, he could not remember what he had wanted to do, which was actually to weep for his dead son. Source and the title. Source: The Fly is taken from Katherine Mansfield's collection of short stories entitled The Dove's Nest. It was published in 1923, a few months after her death. There is ample proof that The Fly was written during or often World War I. It is undeniable that the memory of her brother Leslie brewed over the story. The brother whom Katherine Mansfield loved very much and who was unfortunately killed in the war. In this story, we come to know of the boss's son who also died in the war. Like the boss, old Woodfield too lost his son in the war. The uniform, the telegram bearing the news of a dear one all point to the war. Finally, there is the reference to Belgium where there are miles of graves of those who died in the war. It is thus clear the impression of the World War I has been the indelible stamped on The Fly. For this, it is not difficult for us to guess that the story was written sometime during or after the war. Despite her brief life, Katherine Mansfield was able to pass through the entire period of the World War I, which ended in 1918. She witnessed the destruction of innumerable things and the loss of countless lives in the war. She noticed how war had brutalized human life and attitude. In The Fly, she showed how even a sensible and economically sound old man like the boss degenerated into a worshipper of violence and sadism. Now the title. The present story of Katherine Mansfield bears the title The Fly. Actually, the story consists of three parts. The first part centers round old Woodfield, who came to the boss's office and informed him of his daughter's travel to Belgium, in course of which they had seen by chance the grave of the boss's son lying close by the grave of their own brother. The second part centers round the reaction which this report raised in the boss's mind. During the 6 years that had passed, he had almost forgotten all about his boy, but this suddenly raised a flood of emotions in him. He shut the door to weep for the dead boy because earlier he had found it to be the only way of getting some relief. He remembered how he had built up his business so that his son might one day step into his shoes. The boy had actually been learning the rules and procedures and become the object of admiration to all. But then came the news of his death in the war, making both his business and life utterly meaningless. He looked at the boy's photograph, but he seemed to be cold, even stern looking. The boss took his hands from his face but could not cry. He felt puzzled. The last part centers round a fly that accidentally fell into the boss's inkpot. Seeing it unable to come up the wet and slippery sides of the inkpot, a human being in the war clearly shows that the position held by a human being at such a time is no matter than a fly, and that killing in such a great number goes on only because it is a kind of sport to the slaughterers. Hence, the death of the boss's son shows man's ignoble and worthless fly-like position in the war. Katherine Mansfield, who herself was much moved by the death of her dearly loved brother Leslie, is therefore perfectly justified in naming her short story The Fly. Now, you can understand the meaning of fly. Here it is a insect, not the strength, but a insect. How he plotted by luck that caused him to death. Thank you everyone for listening this video.